Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, we had two quarterbacks play in the game on Saturday, and now neither of them are on the roster.
Yeah. That's our Vikings.
Is it like last year when we just didn't have a kicker when the 53-man roster came on?
Yeah, oh my God. I totally forgot about that. Yes, it is like that. I mean, I guess technically they do have a backup quarterback, right? It's just we have no idea if the guy knows the playbook, is any good in this particular system. It can play offense. I mean, like, obviously when he's had 17 starts, but like, you know, within the confines of what the Vikings do, we have very little idea that this is something that he's capable of. And even then, sight unseen, the Vikings were like, yeah, we're good.
Yeah, well, we saw the preseason too. We don't need any more of that. These guys couldn't do it against the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s. So, no, it is interesting to see. I don't remember a time that the Vikings did something like this, where they just completely cleaned house at one position.
Yeah. I can't remember a time when the Vikings just kind of gave up on a position, right? Because they've always had like a running back, and they've always had a backup running back that they've liked to go with it. And so, you know, that's never been the case. Wide receiver, obviously, that hasn't been the case. Man, that one's tough, right? You just don't do that with offensive linemen. That's just not a thing you do. Edge rusher, defensive tackle, linebacker, I don't remember that ever happening. They've always had like linebackers that they've liked.
I'm just trying to imagine them like wiping out the corners. Like, nope, we're going to start all over. We're just going to make a couple of draft picks. All of you guys stink on ice.
I mean,
well,
like,
let's
historically.
Historically, yes. Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. Again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have the 53-man roster to go over. We'll talk a little bit in passing about what happened in Denver last weekend. It wasn't great. But Kellen Mond got a couple of touchdowns. They didn't help him make the team, but they made him feel good, and sometimes that's more important. So we've got the team to talk about. We've got the 53-man roster, a couple of surprises, a couple of trades as well that have happened since then, and a potential landing spot for Sean Mannion on the practice squad, perhaps. So we'll see. But before we start on any of that, once again, thank you guys for listening. If you enjoy the show and would like to donate to the show, if you hear value in what we put out, you can go over to patreon.com/norsecode and donate there. If you donate at the year subscription, you become eligible for the drawing for the signed and framed Laquan Treadwell as a Viking jersey. He's no longer employed by the Jacksonville Jaguars. So if that was holding you back, if the fact that he was signed to another team made you uncomfortable with donating money to this cause, let me assure you, he is no longer with any team at the time of this recording. So sign up over at patreon.com/norsecode and help James get this picture of Roger Goodell out of my house.
Honestly, that's the only reason he's showing this so hard. That's like the priority that James has.
This signed jersey has brought this community together in ways I didn't think were possible. The number of emails and messages about people and their desire to have this has just warmed my heart. And you too can have the option, the ability. You can throw your name in the hat for the signed Laquan Treadwell cursed jersey over at patreon.com/norsecode and join these fine people. SB are the initials. Thank you so much for joining up. Also, Zach Green, thank you. The letter S, I'm a big supporter of the letter S. Thank you. Alex P, thank you so much. And Dr. Arnold Schmoove, thank you so much for upgrading to the year subscription. Again, the year subscription is $37.81 as opposed to $42 a year if you just do $3.50 or $3.50 every month for a year. So that is aside. Thank you guys so much for doing that. They just got a bonus episode last week full of some interesting conversation, including Arif breaking my brain with a reference to Star Wars that hurt, quite frankly. And
I had no memory of me doing this to him, and so I actually had to go through the entire episode to listen to it. And I got so excited at what I did to James that I told Chelsea to pause the game she was playing. By the way, Cult of the Lamb on PlayStation. I think it's probably also on PC. I don't know. It's on multiple platforms. Great game if you're into roguelikes. Anyway, I was like, Chelsea, stop playing whatever boring stuff you're playing. I have something elite to share with you.
Watch, you could actually pinpoint the moment in the show where James wants to die.
Just frame by frame. Anyway, she didn't appreciate it as much as I thought she would, but certainly I can guarantee that she listened.
Well, sometimes that's all you get out of a relationship, so you should just be happy with what you got. So thank you guys so much. Patreon.com/NorseCode. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well and head over there. Or you can be like Jesse from Brooklyn and go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up, we finally had a sale, you can pick up the Norse Code shower curtain. Now, the Norse Code shower curtain has been a joke for some time now, and the fact that I finally convinced somebody to buy it makes me feel...
This was a negotiation. I do have to emphasize.
This was a negotiation, so I just want to say thank you so much for doing that. Jesse, here's the rule. If you buy the Norse Code shower curtain, I'll pimp out your album if you just put it out. So the band's called All Due Respect. The album is called Strings Attached. It's on Spotify and everything. Check it out. I like it. I think it's kind of cool. So check it out. It's an album from a listener. So it's worth checking out. So again, that's the band is called All Due Respect, and the album is called Strings Attached. So now that we have all that shilling out of the way, two quick things. We are going to be doing a live show in London over at the Antwerp Arms. Check that out. It'll be happening after the game. Looking forward to meeting some of you out at that. Also, we've got some fun planned for the rest of the year. So thank you guys so much. You guys are the reason why we are able to do this show. You're the reason why we are able to be ad-free. You guys are the reason why we are able to travel to London for things. So again, thank you so much. And let's get into the 53-man roster and a brief review of the Denver loss. So we have the list. It was whittled down throughout the day. A lot of fake accounts had their day in the sun. It was
they certainly. I mean, it wasn't quite the Super Bowl. That's obviously NFL free agency.
Yes,
but it was like a primetime game for them.
It was important. This was their Thanksgiving game.
Yeah.
All eyes were on you, and by God, they pulled through.
Yeah, they delivered.
Yeah. So the biggest news out of this is, of course, the fact that the two quarterbacks who played in the game on Saturday are no longer on the roster. One may end up coming back on the practice squad, but this is different. This seems like, along with everything else coming from last year's draft, it seems like they are writing off the last year or so.
Yeah, I don't know whether or not to call it like a repudiation of the previous regime, because the players that they got rid of, especially obviously the third rounders, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail, were all players that were like not good, right? Like they didn't perform well in camp. They didn't seem to make a case for themselves last year. The Vikings seemed to have antipathy for them while they were the ones who drafted them, right? Because like Mike Zimmer's comments about Kellen Mond are, pretty well known. Wyatt Davis remained as a second string / third stringer throughout the year without any mention of his possibility of playing guard. He was kind of even kept out of the starting guard competition, despite being a third round pick that very often you'll find end up starting, right? Like like for Ed Ingram, right? Bottom of the second round, could have been a third rounder, functionally a third rounder in terms of draft capital, still like won the starting job, right? So this third rounder did not, right? And then Chaz Surratt, who just didn't see the field. Troy Dye and Blake Lynch were both ahead of him. And so they didn't think the world of these guys either. And then you've got another year, and now you've got the ability to say, hey, you're not a rookie. You don't have like, the latitude that you typically give somebody who might be, just learning the position or whatever. So that's it. You're done. So I think that it was less kind of like a, hey, the previous regime has their mark all over this. These players don't fit what we want, culturally, or they don't fit what we want from a scheme perspective, or they don't fit what we want from like a tools perspective. It was just they're not good at football, I think was primarily it. But they did separate themselves from the regime in a big way by getting rid of a bunch of players from last year's draft. That said, they're featuring a lot of those players too. Christian Darrisaw has been entrenched at left tackle. Cameron Bynum is the starting safety over Lewis Seen, who they did draft, right? They've got, players from the previous regime that, were in competitions that won, like Cameron Dantzler. Patrick Jones, it could overtake DJ Wanham, right? So it's interesting because the hits from last year's draft, aside from Darrisaw, who we don't really know yet, but the hits from last year's draft seem to be overperforming their draft position, some like Cameron Bynum, really substantially. And the misses from last year's draft are they just got cut. Like there's nobody who's underperforming, really. It's either you're way exceeding expectations or you're so bad you don't deserve to be on a roster, no in between. So I find that draft class is going to be kind of interesting to discuss, for a while, because I don't know how much of a failure you can say that draft class is if Cameron Bynum continues to play at such a level that they will continue having difficulty figuring out what to do with Lewis Seen, or, Christian Darrisaw does turn into Trent Williams, right? Like if that happens, if those two picks hit and you've got like a backup Patrick Jones, who's like a pretty good backup, like, is that draft a failure? Like all those third rounders like washed out. Okay, fine. The fourth rounder washed out, whatever. But you got a starter in the fifth round, right? Like, the 2015 draft, obviously notable for a lot of reasons, right? Daniil Hunter, I think Eric Hendricks is in that draft, Stephon Diggs is in that draft. But like, I think a lot of people would have been like, well, what a great draft. They got Stephon Diggs in the fifth round. And I'm not saying like Bynum is on the same trajectory or anything like that. But if he continues to keep Lewis Seen out of the starting position, it'd be hard to say that was like a bad draft, just based off of the fact that your late rounders hit well more than you thought that they would. So really interesting. But I do think that there is something about the regime just saying, hey, these are our guys. Armon Watts, talented guy, don't want him. We're going to bring somebody in who the staff is, I guess, maybe not familiar with, but, kind of, fits our fingerprints a little bit more. Bringing in Harrison Phillips, getting rid of Michael Pierce, right? So there is some element of an overhaul, right? And, you've got players like Patrick Peterson who you wouldn't identify as being like, oh, that's a Zimmer guy. That's Patrick Peterson, right? Harrison Smith, that's just Harrison Smith. So there are some guys where they're kind of scheme proof, but they bring in a lot of people that have some familiarity with what they're attempting to do or seem to fit the role. So you're in between, I think, this big shift in the identity of the Vikings from a roster or personnel perspective, and not attempting to throw the baby out with the bathwater with that group. But there were like a number of surprises, including getting rid of players that they themselves had signed and probably expected to start, right? Like Jesse Davis, like that is acknowledging that you made a mistake and trying to get as much value as you can out of that mistake.
I was actually just about to ask what you thought the biggest surprise, other than the quarterbacks, would have been this for cut down day.
Yeah, I think Jesse Davis is up there. I think the biggest one has to be Armon Watts, though. I think that both of those were surprises. Armon Watts wasn't even traded; he was just cut, which that is interesting to me, right? But I think that I disagree with the Armon Watts move. I know that there are cap implications to it. I think Armon Watts, getting Blacklock and removing Armon Watts' contract, which is essentially not guaranteed except for like $40,000, so effectively not guaranteed at all. I think all of that results in about $1 million in cap savings, maybe $1.5 million. But I do think you get worse at the position. So I don't really like it. I don't think that that's worth $1 million. I don't know what their plans are for this cap space. It sounds like they might have some plans. I think that helped motivate the Jesse Davis stuff. But um, if they bring in like a center or something like that, if they decide, hey, now we've finally got enough cap space to bring in a center. First of all, it'd be really interesting to just bring in a starting offensive lineman right before the season. Not that that hasn't happened before, but that would be pretty interesting. Second, that would probably change my mind, but I just don't know what opportunities they have with that $1.5 million in cap savings to substantially improve the team more than the difference between Armon Watson and Blacklock. So that one was the most surprising. The Jesse Davis one I thought was also surprising, but it did track a little bit. Other than that, I was surprised a bit ago, before the Denver game that they cut Jordan Berry for Ryan Wright. That was surprising, but now we've got all this other stuff that makes it even more of a shock. And there are some instances where it's like I predicted something and it went the other way, and it doesn't count to me as a surprise. I just happened to think that this was like 60-40 and they chose the 40 or whatever, or I evaluated that wrong. But it was like Zach McLeod versus Luigi Villain. I was pretty confident Janarius Robinson was going to be out despite having been a draft pick. So that one's not a surprise. I guess Troy Dye is a little bit of a surprise, but he was ahead of everybody, so you could very easily predict it happening. But yeah, I think those two are up there, right? Because I took Zach Davidson off of my roster, which some people called a surprise, but it did happen. So it was probably a little bit more likely than people thought. Only having two quarterbacks, I guess Sean Mannion's going to be the one, according to Chris Thomason. Sean Mannion's the one that they're going to be inviting back onto the practice squad. I did say on KFan that if they do cut Kellen Mond, I don't think they'll get him on the practice squad either because he'll be claimed, or because I think he knows that he'll be able to get a contract somewhere that's worth more than a practice squad contract. And so I think that he would just choose not to be on the practice squad. And that's just a guess of mine. So if they did cut both, I did say that I think that it's Sean Mannion on the practice squad. So there is some element where I am still surprised it's two quarterbacks, because very often you've got some sort of upside quarterback on the roster. And in this case, you don't have any, right? It's Sean Mannion, Nick Mullins, and Kirk Cousins, assuming Mannion makes the practice squad. So in that sense, that's a little bit of surprise, but I don't think anything matches those two moves, the Armon Watts move and the Jesse Davis move. And the Armon Watts move, I think, is pretty well above in terms of how, maybe stunning is the wrong word, but how surprising it was over the Jesse Davis one.
Well, maybe you can clear this up for me, because Adam Schefter reported that T.Y. McGill was released, but is that actually what happened?
No, he was waived injured, or I guess waived is the wrong word, released/injured. So I guess in a technical sense, he was released, but he got put on injured reserve. The Vikings announced today in the transaction wire that he's been placed on injured reserve. So that's not accurate, but he is not on the 53-man roster. So in that sense, there's that. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, he has an ankle injury. It was a little bit more serious than I'd initially thought, which blows, because I thought that was one element of why I wasn't as concerned about the defensive line depth as before. It was him and Jonathan Bullard. And now with Bullard on the team and him off the team, you've got James Lynch and Asezi Odomewo. And they were not impressive to me. I mean, Odomewo had a good third preseason game, but a lot of people did that didn't end up making the roster. Like, that one matters a little bit less. So, yeah, I mean, that one sucks. But, I mean, the Vikings have officially listed him on injured reserve. I could probably check the roster right now and make sure. But, yeah, it's not quite a release in the same way.
Yeah, it got a lot of eyeballs on it, because he had such an impressive preseason. And the fact that he went out with an injury fairly early in Saturday's game, it was unfortunate, and you got the feeling he probably wanted to come back in, but then he was reminded, dude, it's the third preseason game.
Yeah, that was the vibe, right? Yeah,
you're gonna be fine. This is not the world's biggest issue. You're probably gonna be okay.
But it turns out, so in terms of making, he didn't have to go out there to make the roster for sure. But turns out it was big enough that they put him on injured reserve before the point at which he would be able to return. So how the rules work here is that in order to be on the designated to return list, if you're on injured reserve - designated to return, that would mean that you'd be able to return after 4 weeks. So you have to be on injured reserve at least 4 weeks. Then you can return, and I believe there's 3 weeks of practice where you're technically not on the active roster, but you're not an injured reserve anymore, and you can activate at any moment during that 3-week period. But at the end of it, you have to elevate that person to the 53-man roster. Anyway, so last year it was 21 days. This year it is 4 weeks. Then you can, and there's 8 players, so you can't, or rather 8 times. So you cannot designate more than 8 instances of designated to return. And the reason I say instances or times instead of players is that if a player goes back on injured reserve and you designate them to return, that's using it twice instead of using it once. But anyway, in order for a player to be able to return at any point in the season, they have to be on the 53-man roster after the initial cutdown day, which of course was today. So they need to be on the roster after 4 p.m. Eastern on August 30th, right? And then you can put them on injured reserve / cut them or whatever and put them on injured reserve and designate them return. So the Vikings did not put him on the 53-man roster in order to do that. They just put him on injured reserve. That takes him out for the season. It's unfortunate, but yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the Vikings website right now. Yeah, he's on injured reserve along with BC Johnson, Kenny Willekes, who entered the training camp on injured reserve, and Thomas Hennigan, who partway through training camp was put on injured reserve.
A couple names here of note. Dan Chisena, gone.
Yeah, the Vikings either don't think that he is all that he's cracked up to be on special teams, or don't feel the need to have a pure special teamer. Like if you go down the roster, I don't think there's a single player here that you could say is there because they're primarily a better special teams player. Like that might be one element that could break ties between, for example, Troy Dye and Chaz Surratt or Troy Dye and Blake Lynch. But like they did not pick the better special teamers at any position, guys that were outright better special teamers or only there for special teams, right? Like Chris Boyd was not a particularly good or active special teamer throughout the preseason or in training camp, but was like clearly playing cornerback, at least in the preseason games, much better than any of these other guys, Nate Hairston, Perry Nickerson, Ty Smith. But Nate Hairston was a better special teamer. And so Hairston, you elevate because he's a special teams guy. Chisena is the same thing. I thought he improved pretty substantially as a receiver this year, but I didn't think that he was a better receiver than anyone else, which tells you how far behind he was. But yeah, he'd primarily be there's no one here that seems to be that guy. So that seems to be kind of a shift that the Vikings have made.
One other name I wanted to mention was Jalen Twyman, who 13 months ago we had reported. I think like as we were beginning to start recording, it had been revealed that he had been shot multiple times in Washington, D.C., near his home, and had made it back onto the team this year, but it looks like it just didn't work out.
Yeah. I'm not like crazy shocked. I did, I think in 1 or 2 projections, because I did one for the Minnesota Football Party and I also did one for The Athletic. In 1 or 2 of them, I did have him making the team, but this is one of those instances where it's like 55-45. I wasn't shocked that he didn't end up making the team. I think I said that Jalen Twyman has a slightly better shot than James Lynch of making it because of the way that the Vikings have, modified James Lynch's body in ways that make it kind of less natural for him to play football that in a way that he's good at. And then Luke said, well, Jalen Twyman did that himself over the course of 2 seasons anyway. So it's a half dozen of one, 6 of the other. Right. So that one was, it sucks for the story. It sucks for kind of the potential that people saw in him because of how good his 2019 Pitt defensive line season was, but he was never going to be that guy after he had reshaped his body in anticipation of the 2021 draft after the 2020 season because he sacrificed his agility and quickness and speed and step off the line for strength, and it just produced a player that was a little bit too small to be a nose tackle and not quick enough to be a 3 technique. And you didn't get the best of both worlds when you put him in a 3-4 like this. So it really kind of sucks. I can't say the counterfactual is true that if he hadn't done that, he would be on the Vikings right now, or that he'd be on another team that was impressed with his workout or something. It's impossible to tell, but it really feels like, he might've gotten some bad advice or maybe not. Maybe he did the best that he could. And it wasn't ever going to be good enough, but yeah, that one was a story that a lot of people were following because Twyman, based on his history, seemingly had sky high ceiling. But based off of like the player that he entered 2021 Vikings camp with, probably was never going to hit that ceiling.
A number of reports came out over the past couple of days that the Vikings were listening to offers for Alexander Mattison. Mattison obviously wants to start someplace, does not feel like he's going to get an opportunity to do that in Minnesota, backing up Dalvin Cook. So is there any truth to this rumor, or is this just something that we're taking as insider gospel?
This is one where it's very easy to say, that they're very open to moving him, but my read on it is that they were very willing to figure out what the market's price was for him, right? It did not seem to me that they were going out of their way to try and see if they could get something for him. It's just when teams were calling, they didn't immediately hang up. And my read on this front office is that they'll almost never hang up. They'll always try and figure out what the market values their players at, because it gives them a little bit more information in figuring out what to do next, right? And so I think that was just, they were listening to offers. It sounded like they weren't interested in any of them, based off of the reporting that we heard from, Darren Wolfson, Chris Thomason. I think Ben Gessling also put out a report to that degree where, they picked up the phone. That doesn't really tell us that they were, going out of their way to try and figure out how to make money off of this, or how to turn a profit on trading Alexander Mattison. So if they traded Mattison, that would come as a surprise to me, despite this being something that has been a talker in the Viking sphere for a couple of weeks now, ever since that first preseason game. But we have to remember that the reason Ty Chandler and Kenny Nwangu broke out in that game is because Mattison didn't play more than 9 snaps. Why didn't he play more than 9 snaps? Because he was a lock to make the roster. So that's like the reasoning, right? So I get it. I get why this was all part of the conversation mill. And obviously other GM, it wasn't like stupid to start this rumor. Other GMs felt that he could have been had. That's why they called the Vikings. But it didn't seem like the Vikings were all that interested. And that doesn't surprise me either. Like I think when I originally fielded this question, either like in a piece or in a podcast or on radio or something, I initially said, I think right after the game, I was like, yeah, trade him. And then I thought about it for like more than 10 minutes. And so every subsequent appearance that I had, I was just like, I don't think they will. And the reasoning for that is just because there's no back like him behind Dalvin Cook on the roster. And I don't mean that in terms of he's so preternaturally talented that he's, a one of one unique guy. Because, if he was, he'd be starting alongside Dalvin Cook. Or at least have a Kareem Hunt role. But that's not it. What I mean is that the type of football that he plays is not played by Bryant Koback or Ty Chandler or Kenny Nwangu, because they are smaller, faster backs that are good at potentially being route runners. I don't know if they're actually good at running routes, but better at being kind of route runners and receivers that excel in situations where they've got the ability to grab space, whether that has to be, 2nd and 10, where there's going to be fewer guys in the box, or you're throwing it, you're pitching it to the outside or something like that. They're not people that you typically would want running up the gut on 3rd and 1. Now, obviously, Alexander Mattison has had some pretty famous moments, especially the 4th and 1 against Seattle. Had some pretty famous moments where he hasn't done that, but he's better at that than those two. And there's a good chance that it could be by a somewhat substantial margin, right? So they don't have somebody that they feel like can do all of the things that they want Dalvin Cook to do with an acceptable amount of drop off in the situation where Dalvin Cook, is injured, right? Which is like not an impossible scenario for Vikings fans to imagine. So because of that, there wasn't really a solution to the depth issue of what happens if we don't have Dalvin Cook available to you, because they have to have an answer for every single starter on the roster. What happens if Christian Darrisaw's not available? Well, you throw Blake Brandel in there. What happens if Justin Jefferson's not available? Well, KJ Osborne plays his role and you promote Amir Smith-Marset or whatever. I think the original answer was going to be BC Johnson, but whatever, right? They don't have an answer to what happens when Dalvin Cook isn't. Well, you do a committee of these two backs that are basically similar in skill set, but you don't have an answer to 3rd and 1. So that's why I didn't think that the trade was going to happen. And I think that evaluating this just as one back is better than the other is a little bit too simplistic for how the Vikings, and I think most teams, think about the running back position. I think that they wanted somebody that could play Dalvin Cook's role.
Well, let's talk about Olabisi Johnson. It's unfortunate what ended up happening, but it looks like the dude had an ACL issue with his other leg.
Yeah, just brutal. I guess the good news-ish is that it wasn't a non-contact injury. And the reason I'm saying that is somewhat good news is that means that his recovery from the initial ACL might not have, probably doesn't seem to have impacted the likelihood of injuring the other ACL. And this used to happen all the time, where an ankle or a knee injury in one leg would result in an injury in the other leg, as athletes would unconsciously put extra load onto that leg that it had not been trained or prepared for, and that imbalance ended up weakening ligaments and then causing those injuries, which usually, I'm not going to say always, but usually, from my understanding, not a doctor, would result in a corresponding injury to the other leg. What was the Vikings cornerback when that happened? Cedric Griffin, right? Griffin. I feel like that happened to him, where he had like 3 ACLs, right? Like one in each leg, and then once again on one of the legs. That used to happen quite often. If you remember Greg Childs, the 4th round pick for the Vikings from Arkansas, the one that wasn't Jarius Wright, he had a patellar tendon tear that is the reason that he dropped from either a high second, late first, or maybe mid second to all the way to the 4th round because that injury was pretty severe. Well, that originally probably occurred because of an ankle injury on the opposite foot while he was playing at Arkansas. And then as he was rehabbing the one knee, he ended up putting a bunch of load on the other knee. So then when he jumped up in training camp to grab a pass and landed back on his legs, he may have unconsciously put extra stress, or the extra stress that he put on over like the previous couple of weeks led to or contributed potentially to the patellar tendon tear. So that's all part of the recovery process they have to be worried about. And it doesn't seem like that's what happened to BC Johnson. It looked like he just got rolled over on the leg, which would mean that recovery might be impacted too, because if it's a non-contact, that's probably a result of wear and tear, which might be more difficult to heal and would result in a less than clean break. Again, not a doctor. This is just kind of what I've picked up over the years covering athlete injuries. If this is a clean break, that's going to make it easier to recover and an easier surgery. So either way, that takes him out for the season. No one's expecting him to be, Jerry Rice and come back, partway through the season. And obviously he can't because of the nature of the injured reserve that he was put on. But he was a guy that I said on the last football party, like the media, that includes me, I'm doing this too, did a poor job of characterizing his role, because Amir Smith-Marset was so exciting to watch in camp. He's such a big personality. His job is big plays. So you saw it all the time. When a guy catches like an 8-yard pass in 7-on-7 drills, that's not really notable, right? But for BC Johnson on the second team, it happened often and again and again and again, that it was pretty notable that he was going to be a pretty important figure for the Vikings in the case of an injury. Now, Matthew Collar was adamant that BC Johnson was the 4th receiver, and I was equally confident that Amir Smith-Marset was the 4th receiver, but that might actually just be a semantics issue. I think that if everybody's healthy, in a situation where BC Johnson also is healthy, if everybody's healthy for the entire season, Amir Smith-Marset gets more snaps. But in a situation where BC Johnson is healthy, but one of the starting 3 go down, BC Johnson gets more snaps because he can do more and more reliably than Amir Smith-Marset can. So I think that that's probably the distinction that the two of us had in approaching that question. And I think that, he's a good player when you compare him to 4th or 5th round receivers across the league. Usually when you say good player, that you're implying some starter that's better than average. That's not what I'm trying to get across here. He's a good player to have on your team. And the Vikings did lose a little bit just by not having BC Johnson available to them. It sucks.
You are correct, by the way. It was Cedric Griffin who ended up tearing both ACL, or I say like both ACLs, one after the other and then after the other.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I do remember. Okay, great.
Yep. He actually tore his first one during the NFC Championship game against the Saints. So
God, always.
it
Every
was,
time.
yeah. I only mentioned that because Luke was watching that the other day and had made mention of that in his Discord. And I was like, oh, well, you know what you could do? You could just put the game on mute and listen to Arif and I talk for a while and listen to one of the most
Did that instead. Yeah.
controversial episodes of Norse Code we've ever done.
Controversial because of what it was about. But the people who listened to it, I'm not going to say universally, I don't know. But the people who reacted to having listened to it loved it.
Yeah, it was odd. So, to say odd as if people don't like the show.
Yeah, what are they on about?
Yeah, well, yeah. All right, so a number of people were traded for, well, I say number. A couple of people were traded for, a couple of people are no longer on the roster. What happened with the trades today?
Yeah, so the Vikings traded away Jesse Davis for got a conditional 2025 seventh round pick.
I didn't know you could do that. Like that far in that far in the future. That is like less than nothing.
That's one of those things where, like, in your fantasy league, you have like a rule on how far out you can, in your dynasty league, how far out you can trade your draft picks. And as soon as the draft is over and that calendar resets, somebody offers you the furthest year away. And you're like, I didn't even know you could. Oh, I guess the draft did just happen. So that opens up you sneaky MFer. I cannot believe as soon as you were available, you tried to trade your 2032 third round pick.
Yep.
Come on. And I think this is exactly what the Vikings were like, yeah, you got to wait until this date. And now you can start trading 2025 picks. And it is a conditional 2025 pick. I thought the Vikings paid the least possible amount you could for a player when they traded for Nick Mullins just like a week ago, right? Which was a conditional 2024 seventh round pick. They were like, what's the least we can offer? It's this. And if he's not active on game day, we don't even have to pay it, right? The least you could possibly offer. And then they sell a guy for somehow even cheaper. So the Jesse Davis trade was a 2025 seventh round pick. I don't know what the condition is, but I assume it's very similar. If he's not active for a game or a number of games, then the Steelers owe the Vikings nothing, right? So there's that. They also, after cutting Armon Watts, which saves them $2.5 million, they traded for Ross Blacklock, which I don't know the years, but I believe. Well, actually, I could just look it up. What am I doing? But it was like also an insanely cheap deal. It was a sixth for Ross Blacklock and a seventh, right? And Blacklock was drafted in the second round, right? Like it wasn't like they found a bottom of the roster guy that turned out to be better than everyone thought, but wasn't good enough to make the team. It was a 2023. Okay, yeah, so it is next year. So it's a 2023 sixth round pick for Ross Blacklock and a 2023 seventh round pick. So also like the least amount you could do, which tells you that, he wasn't remarkably well valued, right, in the market. And so he's probably not a good player. Anything is possible through the power of now cut Ben DiNucci. Which, man, I mean, if you, I can't be the only one who thinks that if you just gathered all the JMU alums, you could put together a team that could take on anybody else in the NFL. But maybe that's just me.
We'll talk about that more in the mailbag.
But yeah, I mean, Blacklock is probably an undersized defensive tackle that was cast in the NFL draft as kind of like a gap shooter, pass rusher type. And that's kind of what he was in Houston, except he wasn't a particularly great pass rusher. His 2021 grade as a pass rusher is better than his 2020 grade, and he didn't have a ton of snaps in either season, but fundamentally he wasn't good. He was kind of average as a pass rusher in 2020, but basically everything was bad. He couldn't tackle. I guess he was a coverage DT. I think I got that a bunch in my replies. But he couldn't tackle. He got blown off of blocks in the run game. He couldn't anchor. He couldn't make sure that guys didn't go up to the second level to block linebackers. It was a disaster for him. Now, the Vikings might be thinking, hey, the environment in Houston was particularly bad. A new environment and a system that maybe suits the skill set a little bit better, we'll be able to unlock him. which might be true, but also clearly the Vikings were the only ones who thought that if this is all they had to pay. I don't know. I think it's a downgrade. I think Armon Watts is just better. I think that he is a borderline starting quality player, and Ross Blacklock is not. So that's the situation they're in. But I mean, he was extremely cheap. Like the problem with the Ross Blacklock trade has nothing to do with this price. It has more to do with the sequencing, right? That it also included and was a response to cutting Armon Watts.
This is like the going out to the Chinese restaurant and the food coming out mysteriously quickly.
Yeah, right, exactly. Is that a heat lamp? How long has that been there?
Did you just get this out of the buffet? Is that what just happened?
Yeah, right, exactly.
This is suspicious. All right, well, let's hit the mailbag because we've got plenty of questions here that should cover the rest of the cuts and some of the decisions that were made as far as the roster was concerned. First up, we have Skull Pinion who asks, why did they cut insert player that upsets you the most?
I guess Armon Watts. This wasn't like an Alex Boone scenario where I was just flabbergasted, like my jaw was on the floor. I mean, that's a starter that, came in with much fanfare that was supposed to improve the offensive line pretty substantially. Armon Watts was effectively, given the nature of modern NFL defenses, a rotational player. He wasn't a starter, although in three defensive line sets, he would be the guy out there on the first team. But he was a heavy rotational player. And I think they cut him to save $1.5 million in cap space, which I don't know what the monetary value of like a 6th round or 7th round pick is, but they cut into the value of saving that cap space by giving up a draft pick as well. Or I guess moving down to the draft because they swapped a 6th and a 7th basically to get him. Very small amount, maybe probably comparable to the $40,000 in cap space that is already dead money with Armon Watts. But yeah, I think the reasoning has to do with cap space.
I'm going to answer this with the generic player that's in there. Why did they cut my favorite player? It just wasn't his year. He didn't have, this was not a good preseason for anybody, and my player shined, but just didn't shine enough. Or maybe he just shined too late. Maybe it was just like Kellen Mond's 2 touchdown passes that looked nice, but in the end didn't mean a damn thing. Darn shame. Jack asks, what's the likelihood we actually move Madison? Even if we don't plan to resign, will his loss be worth netting say a 5th or 6th rounder or maybe some other backup player? And on the defensive side of the ball, how many more years until we are led by the fearsome Luigi Villain?
So I've since twice tweeted out the crucified Waluigi emote that is now an emote in our Discord, which if you're not in our Discord, you don't know this, but I lied to you all on Twitter. I did not create this to honor Luigi Villain. Rather, one of the members of the Discord talked about how they had lost their Waluigi crucifix, and they seemed actually somewhat distressed. And I was like, hey, can you run that sentence by me again? I'm not sure I read that correctly. And they were like, yeah, my Waluigi crucifix. And then they posted a picture of it. And I was like, okay, well, that's that. You definitely posted a picture of a Waluigi crucifix. And I got upset. And I said that this is why God doesn't love you. And then everybody in the Discord took their side and was very into the concept of a religious Waluigi figure, totem of some sort. And so I was like, yo, you know what? I can't fight this. I might as well embrace it. And so
we all called Arif out, in a manner of speaking.
I would say it was a democratic dictatorship here. Where
you're doing a great job of selling the Discord, by the way. Come to the Discord and make Arif feel like crap, so he has to do something in Photoshop to make you feel better.
So I do want to be 100% clear. I didn't draw this. I just took it from Google. I got 100%. This is intellectual property theft. I tweeted it out as if it was my own. absolutely awful. May have been Drawfee, which sucks because I love that channel. Anyway, they drew it. Someone drew it, and I just went into Photoshop to like clean up the lines to make it a transparent PNG and make it more visible and stuff like that. So that's in the Discord, along with a bunch of emotes from Draw Play Dave that, honestly, I also stole. So whatever. That's how emotes work in Discord, I guess.
Arif Hassan, thief.
Well, okay, intellectual property is fake. We can talk about that literally later on in the mailbag.
Boy, all the classes I have on intellectual property, I might actually come in. Oh, this is going to go to hell. Charlie G asks, is Nick Mullins capable of going zero dark LeBron mode?
Why don't we say yes? How does that? Yeah, sure. What does that mean? I don't know. I guess he doesn't tweet. I don't even know what his Twitter is. So yes, that's the answer.
Works for me. Bob the Pigeon asks an important question. Should the Vikings sign Laquan Treadwell now that he's a free agent? Seems like an interesting project for receiver depth.
Yeah, like a one-day retirement jersey for sure. Like I think that so that he retires a Viking, you would want to do that. But that would be the function of that.
Yeah, I mean, if he learned how to catch a ball, that's better than he would have been in Minnesota.
Yeah, sure.
Did you see that, like, Trevor Lawrence now has nobody to throw to? Like, most of his throws last year were just two wide receivers.
Oh, yeah, which they got rid of. Like, they cut Laquan Treadwell and they traded away Laviska Shenault. And that was 25% of his targets. Incredible.
That's amazing. Like, I you couldn't do that if you like. That's just cruel.
Yeah, I love it.
It's amazing. Don't Panic asks, do you think Chris Boyd will be Defensive Player of the Year this season, or will he barely lose out in the voting due to the national media not being familiar with him yet? If that somehow happens, how long until he becomes the first defensive NFL MVP since Alan Page?
Boy, yeah, I think it's kind of one of those things where, year one, he's still kind of hanging on to his old reputation. It's difficult for the national media to give him the respect that he deserves. It's going to be tough for him to really make headway. And then year two, people will really recognize him. I think the same thing happened to Harrison Smith, I want to say. If y'all remember, Chad Greenway made the Pro Bowl the year after he actually deserved to, because he was one of the best outside linebackers the year before. Was it 2009 in the NFL by a pretty good margin, honestly. And then 2010, along with like the rest of the Vikings. And I don't know if these years are 100% true. I'm sure PFF grades align with my perception. If they don't, they're wrong. You can't trust PFF. But it might have been 2010 he made the Pro Bowl, and that year he was actually quite a liability. I did use some pretty different words back then to describe it, but it sometimes that happens with players, or they make the Pro Bowl the year after. And I think that for Chris Boyd's MVP award, that's going to be what happens. After you run in like your sixth return touchdown of the year, it becomes kind of overwhelming, but you still have to make a name for yourself.
Next question is going to be from Andrew Shad, who asks, I feel like Minnesotans are some of the loudest about keeping prospects in state and, quote, bringing kids home at the pro level. If Kwesi started listening to all the suburban dads and brought every current Minnesotan back, how would that team fare?
Has to be awful, right? Like, there's no way that you could do, like, it's not Florida or Texas or Ohio or California. This is Minnesota. I like
U of M had a real rough day today.
Yeah, so you'd get Adam Thielen. That's cool. I guess you get Trey Lance. I don't know what that's worth.
You get Captain Ham.
You get to keep Captain Ham. You get one of the best fullbacks in the NFL by virtue of being one of the fullbacks in the NFL. That's mean. CJ Ham's above average fullback.
I was going to say, as CJ Ham's biggest fan,
I think he's overrated by Minnesotans and underrated by everyone else, which is a cheap, easy way to pretend I'm nuanced about an opinion.
I'm satiated.
Perfect. But yeah, I mean, what do you do at tackle? You probably get some random kid from Eden Prairie, Chris Reed. He'd be a guard, I guess. But I don't think you've got a lot going for you there. I don't have like the full catalog of like people who've been to Minnesota. You would have some pretty good center and backup offensive lineman prospects, right? Like Sam Schluter would be a backup offensive lineman. Frank Ragnow would probably be your center. So, you've got some, movement there, right? But it would be tough, I think, to field a full team, right? Because it's not like you can go back in history and be like, yeah, and then you get Larry Fitzgerald and Terrell Suggs. Like, no, like you get who you get now. And with that in mind, that one is just real tough. And I assume it's anybody who, because Minnesota native, I think that you would want to be fairly expansive in your definition. Anybody who attended a university or a Minnesota college or spent a substantial amount of time living in Minnesota such that you could claim him a la the way people from Minneapolis claim Bob Dylan, right? The Bob Dylan rule, I would say. Man, that I don't know. Who are you lining? Like what you get? Probably, you don't get Rashid Hagman anymore, but you get some intriguing defensive. You get Boy Mafe, right? You get some intriguing defensive linemen, but I don't think you get like a good defensive line. You just get ones that everyone was like, yeah, that guy has potential. And you get like the weird, like, is Carter Coughlin would probably be a 3-4 outside linebacker in the system. That actually would be fun to see. But I think you'd want to expand your definition to include South Dakota and North Dakota players, which of course means now we're going to have to untangle the Carson Wentz issue. But I don't think the Vikings need a tight end.
I don't think you can untangle that easily.
Yeah, because you get Trey Lance at safety, Carson Wentz at tight end. I still don't know what you do at quarterback. Adam Weber?
I don't even know where to start with that. Brian Jellerson asks, question for Arif's Vibe Corner, if it still exists. Which AFC teams put off NFC vibes and vice versa?
I like this question a lot. It's been a while since we've done a Vibes Corner, I think.
It has been. And you and I vary greatly in our opinion of what makes a team an NFC team and what makes a team an AFC team as far as the vibes are concerned.
Yeah, we have very different opinions, both of which I think when you explained yours was extremely valid. I actually think mine is substantially less valid. It makes a lot less sense, but whatever. It's a Vibes Corner. So that, which is why it's interesting that there's an overlap. So my perception of an NFC team and an AFC team is that the AFC teams are just a little bit more comfortable with being kind of chaotic. So like your Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen, your Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, right? Like these are teams that kind of improvise a lot. And it doesn't have to be on offense, right? On defense, Pittsburgh and Baltimore and the New York Jets, right, were all like these really interesting, complex, chaotic defenses that were really difficult to kind of figure out and solve. There's also other definitions of chaos, like the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals, full stop. That's who they are, right? Which just doesn't mean bad, right? The Detroit Lions, I don't think were really chaotic. Well, maybe now, but were never really chaotic. They were just bad, right? So my vibe was always that, even though the two most representative franchises for the AFC over the past 20 years were two of the most regimented, well-run franchises at their peaks, the Indianapolis Colts and the New England Patriots. So that it actually doesn't historically make sense, but that's just where my brain is at. So I think for an AFC team with an NFC vibe, if you go through the New York Jets roster, it very much feels like that. It's like a bunch of NFC West players. I mean, Robert Saleh used to be Seattle Seahawk, but it's a bunch of NFC West players. So you've got like Dwayne Brown at tackle, you've got George Fant at tackle, you've got Laken Tomlinson at guard, you've got a guy named C.J. Mosley, which remember the Vikings had a C.J. Mosley, although this one's a linebacker, that one was a defensive tackle. You've got DJ Reed, and you've got guys that remind me vaguely of like players that were and you've got Solomon Thomas and Sheldon Rankins. Those are both NFC players. It reminds me vaguely of NFC players like Michael Clemens, right, is a defensive end for the New York Jets. That reminds me of Chris Clemens, defensive end for the Seattle Seahawks, right? LaMarcus Joyner, I remember him on the Rams. Jordan Whitehead, Tampa Bay. They've got Quan Alexander, Tampa Bay, and the Saints. They got Vinny Curry, who, if I recall correctly, was on the 49ers. A bunch of guys that were just NFC guys, which like really astoundingly. They got Tyler Conklin, really astoundingly NFC guys. They have 2 guys named Michael Carter. Those sound like Seahawks names, so I'm going to count it. I don't think either of them were ever on the Seahawks. I think they were both drafted by the Jets in 2021. Jeff Smith, 49ers guy. So it very much feels like an NFC team based off of the personnel. But other than that, I'm getting NFC vibes from a lot of the AFC South, right? Like I think Tennessee kind of has an NFC glint to it just by the way like it's regimented. The Raiders just very obviously feel NFC to me. I don't know how to explain it. They felt NFC to me before they grabbed Devontae Adams, and now they feel like it even more. That's just an NFC team to me. So yeah, I think that those are probably the NFC-iest teams of the AFC. And either, James, you can give your NFC teams, or I can just give my AFC teams from the NFC, and then you can give kind of your reasoning. Which do you think is better?
Well, here's my thought on this: is that when I think of the vibes, and I'm leaning into your corner here, so apologies.
I'm asking. Yeah. It's a permissive, yeah.
So it's a consensual corner.
Yeah,
so.
Right.
Looking at the vibe check on this, for a team for me that's in the AFC that has NFC vibes, to me that screams they're playing at noon on Fox. If I can find you at noon on Fox, not on CBS because CBS doesn't want you, if I can catch you there, you probably have more NFC stuff going on for you. Like it just feels like that because that's what Fox tends to cover. So as a result, the team that I think of the most when it comes to why are they playing on Fox today ends up being the Dolphins. I seem to catch the Dolphins more than I should on Fox than I do on CBS. And again, to me, that screams this is an NFC team.
Yeah, I just cannot see the Dolphins as an NFC team. That is an extremely AFC team to me. Now, if you take an iconic Dolphins team, right? If you take like the Dan Marino Dolphins team and you transplant them into the modern NFL, that to me would seem like an NFC team just because of how orderly, I guess, that is relative, I guess, to the era, right? But this Dolphins team feels wacky. Right.
Well, it's got Tualicious on it. We're not going Tuanon. We're going Tualicious due to their owner.
Right.
Everyone must answer to Fergie.
Right. So I get where you're going. I think your definition makes more sense than mine, but I just can't really acknowledge the Miami Dolphins as an NFC-ish team.
Well, how about the flip side for you?
Sure. I think that you could make the case for Washington. I don't know that we're close enough there yet, but chaos, right? It's like, what are they doing at running back? Oh my God, one of them got shot. Oh, he's going to be fine. Antonio Gibson, question mark. I don't know what the deal is there. Carson Wentz is already bombing. I don't know. There's a lot of, and I'm not saying that means they're going to be bad, although yes. But like producing goodness out of that, feels kind of like an AFC team, managing, right? Now, mind you, the Eagles are going to be that, and they still feel NFC to me. So it's not a consistent definition either. Maybe it's because I'm used to like Eagles, like Michael Vick, just like being chaotic, but clearly in the NFC. So, that doesn't work for me. Nobody in the NFC North really fits. I feel like the Lions are the closest because like who's more of what I described than Dan Campbell? Like, holy crap. But maybe it's just because of my attachment and familiarity with the division that I just don't get the vibes from that. For the NFC South, I think I can I think Atlanta has a claim, right? A ticket into the lottery, as it were. But I think Carolina very much feels like that. 3-headed quarterback battles, and they became a 2-headed quarterback battle because of an injury. PJ Walker, weird coach situation, the receiver thing. Like, I don't know. That team is like one of those teams where it's like there was definitely a clear path to being good, and they just decided to roll the dice at every possible opportunity. And now, now it is good news that Baker Mayfield is starting. Like, that's where they are, right? And so, I don't know. Carolina feels like a very AFC team to me. Maybe it's because I used to confuse them all the time with the Jacksonville Jaguars. But they feel AFC team to me. Atlanta, I think, is heading in that direction with like how weird they are. Where the only receiver that they have is Kyle Pitts, who's not even a receiver. One of the receivers is indefinitely suspended because of gambling. It's a Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder competition, and the third round quarterback seems to be like the clear option, and they're not going to do it.
Yep.
That's perfect. And then the NFC West.
This is where it gets good.
So historically, I believe Seattle used to be an AFC team, if I remember correctly, but absolutely not. It 100% is the Arizona Cardinals. I did, right? Like I can't get over it. So we talked about this a little bit for the show. So the thing that stands out to me is one, Cliff Kingsbury shilling NFTs with the shirt that he's wearing that Gary Vaynerchuk retweeted. Two, Kyler Murray is a member of FaZe Clan. What? 3, Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury on the same team together produce some chaotic results that never really make sense. 4, that receiver core outside of DeAndre Hopkins, who I know used to be an AFC guy, but he's universal to me. Put him anywhere, that's the guy that he is. But the Rondale Moore, like that whole group seems AFC to me. I don't think you can ever predict the Arizona Cardinals, the formless defense that they have where like every player plays 2 or 3 different positions or whatever. That's very AFC to me. And then James brought up just this amazing point.
So here's the thing about these teams. Like AFC to me screams like old guard. It just like feels like that. But the other weird thing about the AFC is they have a lot of teams that nobody's a fan of.
Right. Like you never meet a Tennessee Titans fan.
You typically don't.
I think there is a Tennessee Titans fan that listens to this podcast, in which case I'm not sorry. You're clearly fake. There's very few Houston Texans fans despite the population of Houston.
Yep. Jacksonville,
famously Jacksonville, right? Like obviously online there's all kinds of Jacksonville fans, but like come on, the meme about the tarps over the stadium seats is like not new. So that's most of the AFC South, right?
Yep.
The AFC West, come on, the Chargers, they like scientifically do worse at home. Like there's no way you can. Obviously the Chargers, right? No one goes to Chargers games. Before Joe Burrow arrived in Cincinnati, a good argument for like that hell pit, which by the way, the Cincinnati Stadium is like one of the worst. I mean, the stadium might be it's probably not one of the worst stadiums, but it's like one of the worst experiences being near it. Like it's surrounded by highways on all sides. There's no way to like walk into the stadium really. You're always walking under a highway to get to like the press entrance was underneath 2 different highways. Like it was the field that they officially practice at is a field right outside the stadium, which normally is whatever to me. I think actually that would, in a typical situation, be really cool and really like old school NFL-y, except like it's surrounded by highways and there's not like any noise dampers and whatever. So they've got these loud highway noises. And a couple of years ago, there was I don't know if a couple of years ago, but a while ago, there was like this quarterback controversy or something. They didn't know who's going to start a quarterback. So the Cincinnati media or the Cincinnati Bengals PR was like, well, no media can attend these practices. And so the media just parked on the highway with binoculars. And they never fixed that problem, by the way. You could just do that. So the Cincinnati, obviously, like, so when we talk about like people not attending these games, yeah, Arizona, absolutely. Out of the NFC teams, you're just like, yeah, it's a retirement home.
Yeah, like here's the question.
It used to be like the University of Phoenix Stadium. Tell me that's real.
Here's the question. You, listener, have you met a Cardinals fan? Have you? We've run into people who cover the Cardinals. Sure, Blake Murphy is the first name that comes to mind.
It's actually the first name that came to mind for me too.
Yeah, but like, friend of the show. He's been on a couple of times. Here's the thing. I've never met a fan of the Cardinals. Have you? No. You know why? Because they're all crisis actors. Every single one of them, it fills up that stadium every year. They're issued their Larry Fitzgerald jersey, and great. But this team is old guard. This team has existed for a very, very long time. Mysterious number of fans. Nice stadium, but mysterious number of fans. I'm just saying something's wrong here. So yeah, those are that was the vibe corner. We haven't done a vibe corner in a while.
That was good. It's been a long time since a vibe corner.
Let's go to Kevin Abstract Enjoyer, who asks, with Chaz Surratt gone, which quarterback should we bring in to play linebacker?
I think you could convert Trey Lance to linebacker from safety for sure. But from a body type perspective, I think you'd want Carson Wentz because he's a tight end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I remember I think Gerald Hodges used to play quarterback before he was a linebacker. So actually, there is like some historical precedent for a somewhat reasonable quality quarterback. But man, yeah, I think that's your best option. Actually, so I tweeted out a response to this question. I tweeted out, I think you could convert Trey Lance from safety to linebacker. And like half the 49ers fans that found it were like, oh yeah, because Minnesota recruited him to be a defensive back. Funny joke. And the other half were like, man, what the heck is this guy's problem? Jesus. Which, I mean, fair enough, but I was referencing that joke.
Be like, you people just haven't, you're just not aware of my work. Allow me to help.
Right.
Bishop Sycamore alumnus asks, every year a QB gets called off the couch, which leads me to ask, how have we gone this long without having a couch watch QB listing to begin every season?
I think that's great. I think I might pitch a piece like this. I think that this is a lot of fun. I don't know if I'll be able to get The Athletic to do it, but I'll figure out a way to get, because I really like this idea, right? Which would include like, your Matt Moores, your John Kitnas. Remember John Kitna was like a substitute teacher when the Cowboys were like, hey man, do you want to make like a quick $10,000? and he was like, yeah. Let's. I got to throw I know how to throw a ball. I did that at the Lions. This can't possibly be worse. So I like the off the couch rankings. I think Josh Johnson's going to be at the top of it because he like got cut and it. My brain is still processing that you could cut Josh Johnson. But I guess he was not on a roster for a long time before the last 3 years. Like, so it is entirely within like the realm of possibility that, we're dealing with that.
Also, how many more years until the Hell League is the preeminent fantasy commodity and James is a baron? It's coming soon. Which is also just another reminder to everyone involved in the Hell League. All the emails went out. Whether it was the Hell League or the regular league, all the emails went out. So check your spam filters and join the league. You have to be signed in. Otherwise, I will give your spot to people on the Discord. Your spot will be taken from you if you're not signed in by the time I wrote in the email.
The policy of giving it to people in the Discord did seemingly to me erupt spontaneously when that happened and somebody was like, hey, can I have it? And James was like, yeah, okay. And now it's the policy.
Yeah. Why would I give it to anyone else? If you are a Patreon subscriber, absolutely. We'll give you a second shot at the Hell League. So
I mean, I think that makes sense.
Another reason to sign up for the Patreon? Maybe. Which is also to say, I have another spot for the Hell League, and I haven't decided if I want to auction this off or what I want to do with it. But we'll see. I'll post something on Twitter tomorrow about it, I'm sure. Let's go to Tim Rizzo, who asks, it's been mentioned briefly, but can you best describe why Luigi Villain is not only the greatest name in Vikings history? It's not, but perhaps all of professional sports. Arif, is there a name that is synonymous with the Vikings and professional sports that is better than Luigi Villain?
I mean, we have a whole channel devoted to him in the Discord. There's Case Cookus. Come on, Case Cookus. Cannot beat Case Cookus.
You just can't. Brown's Massage Therapist Union has a question for us, and it goes, for Reef's mental health corner, since I didn't make it into any of the Hell Leagues, what am I supposed to do with all of my pent-up self-hatred this season?
Okay, well, I do like the energy of this question, but man, what do you do with your? I guess watch the Vikings. That seems like
That's pretty self-destructive.
yeah. I cannot think of can't think of like a better way to do that.
No,
Yeah,
that just screams cry for help.
yeah. Also, I think Bo. So hold on. Previous question before that. Bo Wolf all name team draft. So Bo Wolf used to do this like every year, where he'd look up the best names in the NFL draft, and it had great names like Divine Diablo, and names that were full sentences like Aaron Banks and Eric Stokes, which is actually really creative. Bo Wolf is like a genius, and all he uses it to do is tell jokes about sports. But like he has one that's aptronyms, plural noun, people's names that are regarded as amusingly appropriate to their occupations, like Alex Leatherwood, which, rip. Stone Forsyth, Carlos Basham, like Kenneth Gainwell. He has a bunch of not that ones, like Michael Johnson, offensive line for Savannah State, Bobby Brown, defensive tackle for Texas A&M. Then he's got like the best wrestling names like Trevon Grimes and Zane Zandier and Cyrus Tuatelli, Jake Funk. Remember Jake Funk? That's a name.
Boy, that brings me back.
Yeah. He did best team fits like Cleveland Browns and Ben Cleveland, Philadelphia Eagles and Brennan Eagles. And then he did worst team fits, Atlanta Falcons and William Sherman. And I lost my mind at that one. Incredible. But there's a bunch of really good ones in here. Daz Newsome, DiCaprio Boodle, Wap Fillier, Tutu Atwell, Diamador Lenore. We saw Diamador Lenore with the San Francisco 49ers in the preseason just now. Let's see. Hastily thought of witness protection names: JC Chalk, Eli Stove, Ian Book, Jet Toner. This is a good article. Brady Breeze was a snake oil water infused cocktail. Name is made up by aliens: Jack Bath the Fourth, Michael Dwunfor, Isaiah Loudermilk. It's so good. He does this every year. I'll link one of them in the show notes.
That's fantastic. Also, follow up to last week's question: how many players were on your list of the 40 that got cut? Back, if you missed last episode, there was a question for Reef to pick the 53, and every time you were right, you got 1,000. But if you missed one, you brought down to 0. So Reef just decided he was going to do 40. How many people from your list of 40 were cut, and which unemployed individual can you blame for not getting your 40K?
Oh, this is so easy, right? Like, I boofed it big with a number of players that I thought were locks. Armon Watts and Jesse Davis are like really good examples. But I think when we did this, I probably wouldn't have picked Jordan Berry. I probably would have been safe with that, but I would have thought about it, right? And then they cut him for Ryan Wright, I think, back when we did. But I didn't actually construct the 40. I just said that would be my approach. But if I'm going to be 100% honest, I would not have gotten $40,000 because of Armon Watts and Jesse Davis. Now, who else would I have missed on that they cut? I don't think anybody else. I think it's just those two. But it's an all or nothing thing. So yeah, I'm trying to see. Actually, let me take a look at the Vikings cuts, right? Because they just out. Julian Taylor, T.Y. McGill, Armon Watts, Jalen Twyman, T.J. Smith, Jesse Davis, Zach Davidson. Yeah, I would not have put my money on Zach Davidson. That one was easy. I probably would have ended up with like 38 instead of 40, but that's where I would be. And I would have missed out on Armon Watts and Jesse Davis.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the next question, which is going to be from JM, who asks, for a Reef's gambling corner, I'm really looking to take my addiction to the next level this year.
Good.
Good. Why the hell not? What are your favorite / most comprehensive data sources for sports gambling, free or otherwise?
So you have to be careful with this because the name of the game in gambling is to develop an edge. And as soon as information is publicly available, it's regarded as something that the market knows. Now, I think that they overdo this because I don't think that the gambling market has as perfect knowledge as they like to say they do. But like, there's a long like history of of sharps making fun of people for moving their line based off of data, or for making bets based off of data that is relatively publicly available. Um, and there's a even longer history of sharps hating touts, and touts are people who sell picks, because if you're a tout, if your picks are so good, you make more money betting with them. If you don't have enough money and you're just looking for beginning money with a tout, you should be so confident in your picks that you should be able to borrow money, or at least build up a bankroll, to know that your method works, and then continue making bigger and better picks. And you actually lose money selling your picks by making them public, and not being able to make the picks yourself, because you can maybe not no limit them, except maybe in some offshore books, but you can bet substantially more money than you'd make in theory selling these picks. So I'd be careful with that. That said, I think that if you play around with Pro Football Focus data, you can do some stuff. The problem is that Pro Football Focus has begun moving lines quicker than probably you would have the ability to take advantage of the data, unless you have some access to data that comes before the website goes live, which would be pretty rare. But when the Pro Football Focus green line gets published, the green line beats the opening line by a somewhat sustainable, reasonable margin. And the market corrects really quickly in response to PFF green line. And then it no longer wins after the against the market after it's been published for a small period of time. So it does not beat it. The green line doesn't beat the closing line. It only beats the opening line. But in terms of developing, data sources, I would say that Pro Football Focus is probably going to be one of your better bets in terms of a comprehensive data source. I think if you want to use a data source that not as many people use, but is very detailed, you do Sports Info Solutions. I think that their Data Hub Pro is really excellent. It costs a lot of money, but if you're asking me for otherwise, you said comprehensive data sources for gambling free or otherwise, that's otherwise. I think that that's pretty good. Otherwise, you're going to have to go into like some pretty extreme pricing tiers to get some of the most interesting data. But yeah, I don't think that you're going to be able to beat the market because you've got access to the most comprehensive data sources. Even though I think that sharps overstate the degree that sharps have access to knowledge. But yeah, I would say that those are probably the areas that you can begin trying to hone your ability to to transform data into something actionable for gambling.
Kenneth Allen asks, with Kellen Mond gone, can we now expect the Vikings to roster Ben DiNucci?
Yes, but only because Case Cookis is injured.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, for James's irresponsible speculation corner, there's a corner for me.
Hey.
Where was Tom Brady during his absence, and why does he look so ragged? Is it just because he finally had to spend time with his family?
Well, James?
Well, it's funny because his official excuse appeared to sound like, I had reservations for a hotel and a vacation, and I wasn't, and I just wasn't going to be able to reschedule. Like that was the way it came out when he was in his presser. He looked really annoyed. Like he looked like he had to, not that he was flying across the country, but that he was driving across the country. Like he had that sort of like shakiness to him. The dad that said that he was going to turn the car around if you don't stop hitting your sister, like that sort of thing. Boy, was it because he had to spend time with his family? I'm not sold on that. I think this was all a ruse. I still think he's going to come up as a performer on the Masked Singer.
It's just so made up. I can't, like, it just out of like I'm not going to make a bet, but I was going to say I would eat a sock, but I realized that I'm the kind of person that would feel obligated to eat a sock if I was wrong, and I am not willing to risk that much. But that's like out of whole, like that person probably was watching The Masked Singer and was like, hey, I've got an idea. And then they matched up some stuff and it just the dates happened to line up kind of. So I shouldn't be so bitter. We're all having fun.
it's possible he's going to do the Masked Singer, although he seemed pretty adamant against the idea that that was what was going on. The pro move at that point would be, I'm not here to address whatever, and just make it like
Oh,
appear.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that that is the right move, right? Because I think that um you should say, "Hey, if I was on the Masked Singer, I wouldn't tell you that, right? That would violate the integrity of the Masked Singer." And that would definitely make people think that you were on it. But like that allows you, especially when you don't show up there, that allows you to always be able to say that. One good example of this is when I was writing my Shrine game story. I referenced to sources they instead of he or she, and someone by my editor was like, "Hey, Arif, you referenced to sources they. Is that because they identify as non-binary, or is it because they're a woman and identifying as source as she in a male-dominated industry would immediately identify her?" And I was like, well, I'm not going to, unless the athletic requires me to disclose my source to my editor, which in a lot of situations it does. In this situation, it specifically in this situation, it didn't. Um, I said, no, I'm not going to, but like, I want to use they for every source in this instance, in case one of them happens to be a woman, and then later on it becomes very obvious that I reference a bunch of people as he and then one person as they, and now everybody's looking for the person who identifies as she in this entire group of people, and I've given the game away, right? It's the same thing, is that you always act as if there's going to be some level of secrecy that could be involved in what you do, you always act as if there's secrecy unless you have a positive desire to tell people what you're doing. Like, oh, I couldn't make it. I was building a children's hospital. I should have let you all know. But I didn't want, like, if I didn't finish in time, I didn't want you all to know that I screwed up building the children's hospital, but it's done now. You can all see it. And I don't have to be embarrassed about you seeing it before it was done. Here it is in Tampa Bay or whatever.
It's possible that he was a part of some, like, something that's going to inspire. Maybe he was a part of the new National Treasure movie for by with Nicolas Cage.
Good chance. Yeah, I think that you're onto something here.
Yep, he looked properly grizzled at the podium. So it seems very possible. We're gonna make a trip to the beekeeping corner, ladies and gentlemen. Euleron asks for a Reef's beekeeping corner. The president of my local beekeeping club recently said in a Facebook Live video that I can borrow frames of brood eggs from a strongly populated hive and install them in some of my lower population colonies to even them out before winter. Can Arif confirm that this method is safe and effective? If I do redistribute the brood, am I removing the incentive for the other two queens to work hard laying eggs? Thanks. P.S. They are all Italian race this year, so there should be no issues with integration.
I am so upset. The amount of red flag / dog whistles in this question making me lose my mind. All right. You piece. Anyway. So putting those aside and pretending maybe perhaps they didn't happen, it's very common to move egg broods from they tend to call it the weaker I don't know, nuke. I've only seen it written out. I haven't heard it when beekeepers talk about it. But when you've got a bunch of frames together, like 10 frames that are fully full, they're part of a colony, sometimes referred to as a nuc. It's kind of the box that the frames are in. Anyway, it's pretty common to move brood eggs from a stronger one to a weaker one. There was a debate in one of the forums I was reading, as I do, because I am a beekeeping enthusiast and I want to keep up to date on the latest news, about whether or not you should brush off the nursery bees, as well as the queen bee and the forager bee. So you should always brush off the queen bee and let the queen bee stay in the strong colony. But there was a debate, and the first answer was yes, you should brush all the bees off. The second answer was no, you shouldn't brush any of the bees off unless it's the queen. And the third one was it depends. So a vibrant debate in the beekeeping community about whether or not you should brush the bees off. But my understanding was it really depends on whether or not it makes sense to have nursing bees added to the colony in addition to adding eggs and stuff like that. So it depends on the state of the weaker colony. Yeah, I there's no bees are not capitalist, and so there is no issue with incentives for bees from a competition perspective because they don't think of eggs as money. That feels like obvious to me, but clearly you're poisoned. Um, so if you quote unquote redistribute the eggs, you know, you're fine. Also, that's not how humans work, but I'm not going to get into that one.
Will the bees still operate at optimum efficiency if they have access to the means of production?
So, in analogous situations that would not be the eusocial creatures that we were discussing, the bees, but perhaps some mythical other creature that happens to organize itself socially. When you find that happening, where the creatures that are laboring, let's say, have more control over the, I don't know, say products of labor, right? And the mechanisms by which they produce those things, um, there is actually fairly good evidence that the production process not only happens to be more efficient than you would imagine in a separate alternative scenario, any number of ways that could be done, of course, um, but also happens to be done in a manner that seems to be more equitable, that seems to allow those creatures to have a stronger emotional connection to the way that those products are produced, and happens to be a little bit more sustainable in a lot of ways because there's not really a reason to say overproduce beyond your means. So, um, again, an imaginary analogy for an unknown creature that I won't specify that I will also say applies to bees in the context of being efficient. But efficient means a lot of different things. It doesn't just mean producing the most for the least amount of money. Cool. I navigated that successfully, I think.
But you managed to stay away from politics, which is impressive considering.
Wait, what do you mean? What was political about any of that? I don't think that was a particular accomplishment. There was nothing political in the question, and therefore not in the answer.
Excellent. Nolan Kaler has a bit of copy pasta for us. Says, for the intersection of Arif's beekeeping and legal corners, my neighbor is a beekeeper and his bees steal pollen from my yard to make honey for him that he sells at a farmer's market. I have never received a dime in earnings even though the bees are stealing my pollen. How much should I sue him for? And what evidence should I start documenting?
There's no way that you both conspired for this one, right? Like, no way the two question askers both went in the same direction somehow, right? Like, there's no way. Anyway, from a legal perspective, no, you can't do that. From an ethical perspective, no, you can't. You cannot charge rent for your flowers like that. Nope.
That's a bridge
Or
too far.
or perhaps any number of other things. I don't know. Rent is a concept. Certainly, we should want to evaluate it. Uh, yeah, I mean, like an economic, rent-seeking behavior, right? From an economics perspective, right? It's just something that, in terms of passive income versus production versus the way that the economy is organized. I think just like abstractly something we should think about.
Weren't you
Rent
a
means lot of
landlord
things
for a while?
I don't know what you're talking about, and also I resent the accusation.
You also resemble it too, but we'll talk about that later.
So, ignoring any slander along those lines, I would say legally you don't have a case, and ethically you have even less of one. Though you should, I would walk up to your neighbor and say, "Hey, it's really cool that you're producing honey locally. That's awesome. We really want to have more local food production. And what's really cool is I see the bees at my flower bed all the time. And it's so cool that the bees that you're producing help my flower garden out a lot by pollinating things and making sure that my flowers are healthy. Um, hey, any chance, I could have some honey from that? It sounds like it would be really tasty, coming from my flower garden. And, because that was appropriately passive aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
your neighbor will say, oh man, I'm running out. I think I just gave my last one away, but the next time, we get a batch in, I'll let you know. And then I think you're good, right? Because I mean, they'll probably never give it to you, but the issue has been addressed.
Yep. Social contract states that both of you now have to forget this conversation happened, even though it's just going to stink every time you walk over there.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that seems perfect.
Yeah, basically. Kevin asks, what's the worst airline in the United States to fly in your experience?
So the meme is Spirit Airlines, and I do really dislike flying Spirit Airlines. The bigger issue for me for Spirit Airlines is not the experience of the flight, which is not great. It's very uncomfortable. You can't recline the seat. There's not enough leg room. The seats are just not designed, I think, for humans. That's all bad, right? I'm not saying it's a great experience, but the problem with Spirit Airlines is the amount that you pay for the ticket is like a lie. Everything that you need to do to get on that flight costs you more money, right? It's like, hey, here's the legroom fee that you didn't know about. Like, legroom fee? I'm not getting more legroom. It's like, yeah, well, you're getting leg room, like, period. So pay up. Or like, hey, you've got a carry on. It's like, that's a purse. Why? I got to pay for the purse? And they're like, oh, yeah. I mean, the default is that you're traveling with nothing at all except the clothes on your back, which let's talk about that too. Like, the Spirit Airlines is just gouges you, right? That's the problem. In terms of like the flight experience, I've had a lot of problems with Frontier. Very uncomfortable. Again, not a lot of legroom.
Frontier was going to be my pick simply because of the hilarious amount of legroom. For someone my size, even being in like legroom like wise, even being in the emergency exit row is misery.
Yeah. Which when you're in that situation, like, what are you doing? Just awful.
Yeah, just not overly fun. Logan TC asks, for Arif's parenting corner, my almost 2-year-old still uses a pacifier to sleep. We're terrified that taking away will ruin his and our sleep schedules. How do we transition him off the pacifier without ruining our sleep?
Okay, so I actually did not see this in the. Is this for me? Is this a question for my parent? Okay, yeah,
yes,
I did not see this one, so I did not.
I'm only here to make sure that no one dies in your parenting corner.
Right, which one would think that you know what, I'm not going to broach that line of thought. Transition off the password ruining the sleep. Oh Jesus. Oh boy. What if you replace the pacifier with increasingly harder to chew material?
I'm sorry, what? Like, you replace the pacifier with like a Matchbox car or something?
Well, at the end.
Oh, you're working up to the Matchbox car. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. So you need to create a product that would not fall into the child's mouth. I understand that that's the risk here. In much the same way a pacifier, because it has flared out at the mouth, doesn't fall into the kid's mouth. So you got to do that. But it's metal at the end, right? But it's rubber or whatever. Pacifiers have rubber in them, right?
Typically plastic, but yes, go on.
Sure. Okay. So plastic, they just get like a really pliable plastic, right? And then you just kind of move up like a soft wood. Actually, most soft woods are pretty poisonous but like something along those lines. Maybe progressively harder plastics, and then you end up with like a steel pacifier, and the baby's not going to want it at the end.
There are so many things wrong with what was just said here. I just need to take a moment and figure out where I'm going to start.
Well, we're not using the wood. The wood's dangerous, because like the resins and stuff and how they treat wood. So you wouldn't right. So progressively harder plastics, and then you probably actually want to put like a good coat of non-toxic paint over the metal one. But yeah, that seems. Why? What's wrong?
What you could also theoretically do is wean them off of it, and you can replace it with some other like form of comfort, say a blanket, maybe something that, after X period of time, after they've been asleep, you take the binky out or whatever. That works a little bit better than shoving wood or a matchbox car in the kid's mouth.
You say shoving, but you're just replacing the pacifier with a pacifier shaped object that's just slightly harder than the one that you were using.
Well, no, that's what you're suggesting. I'm suggesting potentially a blanket of some kind.
I'm just saying the language that you're using makes my eminently reasonable proposal somehow seem abusive.
Listen, Mr. Landlord, what I'm trying to say here is that's exactly what's going on. You don't feed your kid chunks of wood.
No, hold on. We got rid of the wood. That was part of the brainstorming process. The wood is no longer.
Oh, okay. So you're not not going through the Menards like remainder section in order to find something for the kid. Okay, I wanted to be sure.
I said no longer with the wood because of the way wood gets treated and stuff like that. So it's just progressively harder food safe plastics until you get to the metal at the end, which you should paint over because you don't want the kid. Anyway, this is important because if you're on a pacifier for long enough, it screws up the kid's teeth, I think. I think this definitely will resolve the problem of screwing up your kid's teeth.
Make sure there's some lead in that paint too, just to be sure.
I said non-toxic safe paint.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about this. I care about the kids.
Do you, though?
Get a metal pacifier.
Should I? Also, should I listen to the Rogan Rogers podcast? I have a feeling that it will create pure rage inside of me. No, you shouldn't. Of all people...
Speaking of 2-year-olds.
Of all people to do a really good in-depth job on something... Justice Mosqueda wrote all about this, so you don't have to listen to it.
Yeah, actually, we'll link that in the show notes. That's for sure.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion on that. Let's go to Tankby, who asks for a Reef's esoteric occultism corner. When we open the season against the Green Bay Packers, Mercury will be in retrograde in Libra, and the full moon will be in or around Pisces.
Of course, I knew that.
What could this mean for our season with it starting out like this? And how could we best implore the baby witches who usually hex the moon to turn their intention and attention instead on helping us have a successful year?
Okay, so... the great thing about astrology, the thing that we all know is true about astrology, is that you're the protagonist. And what the stars do is a reference on how your life specifically will play out. So I did some really deep research into this. I consulted all of the astrology experts, and
full minutes were spent on this. Full minutes.
Yeah. And my understanding here is that with Mercury in retrograde, there is a level of confusion in a time typically reserved for balance, right? Libra, the scales. But with Mercury in retrograde, which has to do with the way that we perceive rotation, revolutions from an area where revolution is occurring at different speeds. So it looks like Mercury goes backwards in the sky. But it is survivable. So it is a confusion at a time when everything should be stable, but it is survivable. It creates a bit of an identity crisis, but there is a level of confidence that emerges as a product of all of this. So my research says, be sure to love yourself. That's what the research says. Now, in order to navigate this confusion in, again, a time that should typically be a little bit more stable, I would say you need to recruit the baby witches to fight in a magical sense, not like, physically or anything like that. They're not like a world ending, but recruit the baby witches to enter magical combat with Blue of Earth, the natural enemy of baby witches.
Yes, the natural enemy who has declared herself to not be a witch.
Right. That's one reason.
That's clearly something a witch would say.
Right. And especially one attempting subterfuge against both the public at large and other witches. Dangerous recruiting tactic. Hey, I'm not a witch. You can listen to me. I wouldn't do witchy stuff. Now open the Necronomicon. Very, very dangerous. So, and potentially as a coven of our own baby witches. So you need to appeal to the baby witch's sense of duty to witchdom, which, I mean, historically we know kind of shaky. Whole reason that they hex the moon, not a ton of duty to witchdom, but appeal to kind of the lessons they learned from that and fight Blue of Earth. And we know that that will have an impact on Aaron Rodgers, which should allow the Vikings to stabilize their identity in time to win the game against Green Bay.
There is that. In case you're completely lost, check out the 2020 Christmas episode where Arif proceeds to break my brain and describe issues with the baby witches.
Okay, this is what happens when you get to be more online than James.
That takes skill. Nick Howard asks, question for the job corner. Have a phone screening with our recruiter for a promotion. They always ask, why am I interested in this job? What can I tell them other than I need money?
So this is a promotion. So presumably this is like a higher station with the job you currently hold. It sounds like it's not internal to the company. It would just be a higher level of work than the previous amount of work. I would say that you love to control other people's lives. That, I feel like that's got to fly, right? That's got to sell really well.
Yep. The more you can put into that and mention that you are a controlling person and that you are looking for power.
Right. Yeah. Describe your management, because it sounds like you've got more responsibility, potentially including over, how other people operate, maybe a group atmosphere where you have a little bit more authority. Describe your management style as dictatorial. I feel like that only has positive vibes in the United States.
Yeah. Be like,
maybe totalitarian even, right? Because you have a total understanding of all the variables involved.
Yeah. That, and you're trying to crush the opposition because everyone is always out to get you.
Yeah.
This is a good start. Gaming Nerd asks, for James's game day cooking corner, what is your go-to season opening meal? Is it better to eat out for that open season optimistic air, or make something quietly at home because it'll just be another season of pain? Also for Arif, what wine would you pair with the answer James gave to that question?
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, what's your answer?
Well, here's my thing. I tend to like to go out for the first game. That's usually my thing. I think this year I won't. I think this year I'm probably going to end up just making a couple of burgers. But, yeah, something kind of simple, but it's super enjoyable. So I'll probably end up making burgers and hot dogs and just taking it a little bit easy this year. Around the time of the first game, I'm actually going to be cooking a brisket for the first time.
Ooh.
So I might even have leftovers from the day before. So brisket might be reheated into some form.
That's cool.
So what wine would you pair? Which Boone's Farm would you put it on, Arif?
So I'm definitely not Googling wine pairing with brisket. That would be amateur hour type stuff.
Yeah, that'd be somebody who fakes a beekeeping corner. That's something that they would do. That's something that you were above.
Right, exactly. I would never do that. Boy, I don't know how to pronounce that. Yeah, we're going to skip that one. Okay, this is not the resource that I had prepared for myself while deeply thinking about my history with being a wine sommelier, which I definitely pronounced correctly just now and not mumbled through despite knowing how it's pronounced. So obviously you want a red of some sort. I mean, brisket, right? But the question is like, is it like smoked or slow cooked brisket? Is it, maybe a little bit lighter where you can kind of, experience like tomato or vinegar based sauces? Those questions kind of play a pretty big role. If it's a chili with a tomato base, that, kind of changes things a little bit. So I would say, because this is like a smoked brisket, kind of the classic is a Pinot Noir, right? You've got these kind of, these fruity notes are like cherry, raspberry, plum, kind of the sweet, but not too sweet and definitely not too tart. But with a taste of that tartness that kind of brings out, a lot of the flavors that, kind of get hidden in smokiness. So, that's definitely a thing that I knew already.
Well, good. I'm glad that you were able to impart all of that knowledge that you've had forever. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys all enjoyed it. We will be back just in time for the week 1 kickoff for the Thursday night game. So we'll be back that night with an interview with a Packers writer extraordinaire, special teams expert of sorts. That's likely coming. That article that he wrote on the Packers special teams, painful. Why anyone would sit and do that to themselves.
Unnecessary.
That's coming from Arif. Arif found this article to be unnecessary.
I found his tweets to be much less the article.
So look out for that. We're gonna have some fun with that to open up the season. Also, again, if you this is basically the last chance you're gonna get to sign up for the drawing. So check it out, patreon.com/norsecode. Join up there in order to get into the drawing for the one and only, probably in existence, the framed signed jersey for Laquan Treadwell. So, Arif, what do you have to plug?
So over The Athletic, I've got a piece with all of my thoughts on the 53-man roster cut down. I'm going to have a piece on kind of the way that the offense is going to change in contrast to the previous offense, with a particular look, actually, not just for memes, but actually at CJ Ham and kind of the role that he plays in the offense, despite the fact that the Vikings did not have a fullback in the preseason, basically. So that's going to be the piece that comes up next. But right now, I've got a piece on the 53-man cut down.
Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys all enjoyed it. We'll be back next week, just in time for the season kickoff. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that the Vikings are not to be trusted. And we'll see you guys next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of The Athletic, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed, at NorseCodeDN, or my personal account, at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.